Wow, it's certainly been a long time since I made one of those. I think it's about time I made another.
Now, let's get creative.
So here is my trusty pen.
Now we're going to draw a circle and do a massive brainstorm. So, Doctor Who Retrospective number 11. Right, so what could we do? Well, Big Finish CDs, could we do that? Could do the DVDs. What else could we do? I know, how about the rise and fall of character options? Could do wilderness years, Peter Pratt Master, seeing as I already did a retrospective on Roger Delgado's Master. I could also do something about the Colin Baker era. So there's quite a lot of ideas. Wait a minute, I just thought of the very thing I can talk about. I know exactly what this video is going to be all about, but you've probably guessed it from the title anyway.
Right, well, God knows how I haven't got around to this before now. Almost 2 years ago, I talked about the Andrew Cartmel era of Doctor Who. You know, that era that everyone seems to think is shit. But it's not. Doctor Who, in my opinion, was entering a new age as the 1990s was nearly upon us. Well, I say us. Let's face it, some of us watching it weren't even born. And let's face it, neither was I. In case you haven't realised, I was born in 1995. You know, because the clue of the title of my username, The Obsessed Whovian 95. But let's not sidetrack. Naturally, the next thing I'd talk about would be the wilderness years, right? However, seeing as people in the Whovian community on YouTube have already twigged on to the idea of making such videos based on this certain topic, such as Batman March, and people making reviews on the Virgin New Adventures books, such as Doctor Forever and TJ Productions, I've decided for creative reasons that I am not going to do that right now because of these 5 very reasons.
Reason number 1. It's depressing to even think about a time when we didn't have Doctor Who on the telly. Oh, wait, hang on a sec. We don't have it on telly this year either, do we? Oh. Thank you, BBC. Reason number 2. I want to do something original on my channel. I don't want to do the same thing as everybody else on YouTube. Reason number 3. Some novels cost a bomb. And if you want me to be completely honest with you, I'm more invested in completing other forms of my merchandise. If you want to know more, then click that little subscribe box underneath this video right now. And I'm sure once you check out my channel, it will become pretty clear to you what types of merchandise that I like collecting. Reason number 4, I've already done some reviews on stuff when it comes to the wilderness years. If you want to know some of my thoughts on the Wilderness Years, you can check out my review of that awful special so-called 30th anniversary special called Dimensions in Time. Ugh! Just makes my skin crawl. I also did The Curse of Fatal Death.
Magic.
Which, to be fair, is much better, but unfortunately that doesn't count as canon, and hopefully Dimensions in Time doesn't either. Reason number 5. I have no memory of the Wilderness Years, as I had not been exposed to Doctor Who until the day 26th of March 2005, when the episode Rose aired. It was the first time that I ever saw Doctor Who. Christopher Eccleston was my first Doctor. I had never ever heard or seen Doctor Who before that point. I didn't even know it existed. It's kind of a bit of a regret for me, because I never grew up with the classic series, unlike some people who may be watching this video right now. But that's one of the reasons why I'm not doing a video on the Wilderness Years, because I have no recollection of the Wilderness Years, because I was never exposed to Doctor Who. Thank God that I was, later on. On that day, the 26th of March 2005, I think I can safely say that I became a Whovian. I became the obsessed Whovian. But times change, and so must I. No, sorry, I need to stop quoting episodes. Naturally, I'm going to talk about the rebirth of the show, as hopefully this video shall see the rebirth of this series of retrospectives on my channel. What's the date today? 26th of March, you say? Well, that's a coincidence, isn't it? It's 11 years to the day since the series came back to BBC One. Most of my life now, I have been a Whovian. 11 years ago today, I became a Who addict. No, not those guys!
Yes, it's true. Ever since that first episode came out exactly 11 years ago, I've been hooked to Doctor Who, and it's all thanks to this man, Russell T Davies. Now, like many Whovians, Russell T Davies was also a huge fan of Doctor Who. He was brought up with the classic series, so he must have been really annoyed that we hardly got anything in the 1990s related to the TV show. All we could rely on were the books. But what about the actual TV show? After the failed attempt to reboot the show with the ill-fated TV movie starring Paul McGann, sorry Paul, I love you to bits, but that movie was not that good. There was no Doctor Who for 9 years after that. 9 years! Now, imagine that for a sec. Here I am moaning about not having a series in 2016, but I cannot imagine how die-hard Whovians would have felt if they didn't have a show for 9 years. Some even believed it was 16 years, as it was unclear at this point whether Paul McGann's Doctor was actually canon. Of course, we all know by now that he is more canonised in Doctor Who lore than any other Doctor, with all the big finishes he's done, and his image has appeared in the new series since, alongside all the other classic Doctors. But I digress. Russell T Davies wanted proper Doctor Who, Saturday night television for all the family to enjoy. So, in early 2000s, he put all his effort into bringing the show back. But this was no easy feat. By this point, some people had this idea in their heads that Doctor Who was just some old rubbish sci-fi TV show that started in the 1960s, and it ran its course by the end of the 80s, and the idea of it being brought back was something that some were totally against because of the fear that the BBC would lose its audience. And yeah, I can kind of see where they were coming from, to be honest. Nowadays in television, channels
choose what TV shows what they put on, purely based on the amount of viewers that it gets. Back in the late 80s, Doctor Who didn't get many views, but I don't think that was helped by the poorly handled scheduling of the show, because during the Sylvester McCoy era, it was put on during Monday nights against ITV's Coronation Street, which I just think is shit, and don't understand why to this day people sit down and watch this drivel, because it's just total rubbish. Davies constantly tried to get the series commissioned over and over and over again, but many people just didn't want to know. But finally, in 2003, Doctor Who was celebrating its 40th anniversary year. Whovians reunited to celebrate the show's milestone. The BBC must have taken note of this, and they finally listened. Every Whovian, including Russell, finally got their prayers answered. Yes! When the show was brought back in 2005, a second series was commissioned almost immediately, followed by a third, and so on. The episode Rose drew over 10 million viewers in the overnight ratings. As the Ninth Doctor would say, "This is fantastic." Russell T Davies had assembled a new team. He was the executive producer and the head writer. He had finally got to fulfill his lifelong dream of running his favourite show. A new Doctor was cast in the form of Christopher Eccleston, and he was a huge success. He had already worked with Davies on numerous projects before Doctor Who. It seemed like a no-brainer for Chris that he wanted to play the Ninth Doctor, and while he wasn't a hardcore Whovian like other Doctors such as David Tennant or Peter Capaldi, he did have quite a bit of knowledge about the show beforehand, highlighting his memories of the show, such as Patrick Troughton being the Doctor in the late 1960s, battling the Daleks. Yeah, Eccleston quit after one series, and some fans may still be a bit miffed about this. But at the end of the day, it was the man's decision. When looking back at the first season of New Who, there doesn't seem to be any indication which suggested that Eccleston did not enjoy his gig as the Ninth Doctor. I think by the end of it, he just called it a day. He had enough and he didn't want to be typecast. Even now, over a decade on, Eccleston still speaks fondly about the show. So to all you haters out there, go away. While I'm on the subject of Russell T Davies bringing back Doctor Who, let's talk about the companion, Rose Tyler. Now, love her or hate her, Rose Tyler was something of a first in Doctor Who. A lot of the first series shows how her life was before she met the Doctor, and how she changed since she met him. By the climax of the series, it becomes pretty clear to the viewer that this is a character that has been heavily influenced by the Doctor, and now she has a goal in life, and in this case it was to save the Doctor from dying on Satellite 5. We got to learn a little bit about her backstory. We got to meet other members of her family and other people in her life. One episode is entirely dedicated to her dead dad. Now, that was something that never been done in televised Doctor Who ever before. And that is good. When the show came back, it did attract a brand new audience, as well as the old Whovians who waited almost an eternity to see the Doctor in his blue box again. Of course, everything looked different, but the show kept the signature feel of the past. There are tiny references to the classic series here and there in the earlier series of the revived Who, which was always a nice treat. I do honestly feel that nowadays, in the Moffat era, they do this too much. There's a couple of series staples such as the TARDIS still being there, which is great. They have to have the TARDIS. The familiarity of the theme tune. It is without doubt the same show. even if it did feel different to a few hardcore Doctor Who fans that were coming back. Now then, it's time that I briefly mention Daleks, because this was a big one. By the time the series was announced to be returning, Terry Nation, the man responsible for coming up with this concept of the Doctor's most feared enemy, had sadly passed away. One of the most frequently asked questions when the show was announced in 2003 was that if the Daleks would be coming back alongside the Doctor. There were huge question marks about this because there was a clause in the contract of the Terra Nation estate and the BBC, and it basically said that if the Daleks were used in the new series, then they would have to appear in every subsequent series. In other words, the reason why the Daleks have been popping up in more or less every series since 2005, including their cameo appearances in The Waters of Mars and The Wedding of River Song, it's all because Russell T Davies did of course decide that the Daleks were going to be returning in Series 1. If they didn't come back in the first series, they may not have ever returned again in Doctor Who, and furthermore, the series may never be the same again, as the Daleks are one of the hallmarks of the programme. No Daleks, no Doctor Who. It's as simple as that. To conclude with this retrospective, if it wasn't for the efforts of Russell T Davies, I more than likely wouldn't even be here making these videos for all of you guys to watch. There would be no Doctor Who to talk about. Some people may still have seen the show as something that was old hat and well past its sell-by date at this point. It's very hard to imagine how my life would have panned out without Doctor Who, and I'm being deadly serious. It's not just my favourite TV show, but it really is a huge part of my life. I am proud to be a Doctor Who fan, to own all of the DVDs, to collect the figures, the Big Finish CDs, and to talk about it with all of you. And it all started 11 years ago today. Happy 11th anniversary to new Doctor Who, and a big thank you to Russell T Davies for bringing back the show, which introduced me to the Doctor. Thank you very much for watching. I could always talk about these for future videos, you know.